So when I'm thinking of all the different types of watches, the one that comes to mind that delivers the best value when it comes to specifications, robustness, and a lot of additional upside, I would say the dive watch does it more than almost any other category of watch at the more attainable end. And in this video, we're going to follow that theme, looking at some of the best dive watches under $500, looking at over 20 watches on this list. I believe 22 to be exact, if my counting is correct. Now, prices have changed quite a bit in the last couple of years, and I would imagine that's going to be the case in the future as well. So don't come after me if some of the prices change in the future. I tried to pick watches that are either at retail pricing below $500 or maybe sometimes can be found for less than $500. Also, before we jump in here, if you want even more watches, check out our article down below looking at some of the best dive watches under $500. That is a great jumping off point if you want to further your research and are going to try to look at watches beyond what is maybe mentioned on this list. But we have some really good ones here. I try to focus on some newer releases as well as staples in this segment. So now I want to kick us off with some micro brands. And micro brands sometimes do a better job at delivering value for dollar than some of the mainstream brands. And there's some really good dive watches in this sub $500 tier from brands of this type. First, I want to kick it off with the Laurier Neptune. So this is the latest edition of the Laurier Neptune. Very classic look and approach from mid-20th century. You're looking at a brand that was founded in 2018 by a husband and wife team in New York City. They focus on more throwback designs to this era that I'm talking about, more like 1950s, 60s styling. This one leans into more of that big crown type of Submariner vibe, broad arrow, hour hand. It definitely pulls from a lot of different places, but I think it stands on its own as its own independent idea to a degree. 39mm case, 46mm lug to lug, reasonable thickness, and that's thanks to the movement being chosen here. This is a 9 series movement from Miyota, so this is a 4 Hertz movement, tighter range of deviation for accuracy, 200 meters of water resistance, and then the acrylic crystal on top. This was actually chosen for more of an aesthetic purpose, and this also comes equipped with a tube of polywatch, I believe. So they know what they're doing. You can buff out those scratches and adds that vintage charm that this watch is going for. So for another brand that is in this segment of watches that has been pretty consistent with pricing has been Nodus. So you have Laurier on one side of the country. Other side of the country, then you have Nodus. So they're based on the West Coast United States. Here we have their Retrospect. The Retrospect is a 42mm dive watch, thickness of 13mm, lug to lug, pretty compact. So getting that SKX type of approach, 48mm here, water resistance of 200 meters. This is also gonna be using a Seiko caliber on the inside, and they are regulating their watches. They typically will say that these are gonna run in single digits. So Nodus is kind of putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to regulation, which I do appreciate, getting good performance out of these Seiko calibers. Next up, we have a micro, but also could be a brand that could be included in the category of a professional oriented dive watch because it was made by a professional diver. So Paul Scurfield founded this brand. He is actually a watch fan, owner of this company, and a saturation diver during the day. So this is just kind of a fun project for him that's become a real thing. Now, the Scurfa 1 that you're looking at here, the Scurfa Diver 1 is more formally known, is available in stainless steel as well as titanium. The titanium one, I think, offers up a more unique option for people that are looking in this price arena. $200 or so for a titanium dive watch, solid lume, 500 meters of water resistance. It does have a quartz movement on the inside, but this was produced to really withstand the environments that Paul is going through in a saturation environment. So to have that cosign from somebody that has really seen it all when it comes to these underwater environments is pretty cool. Also has a functional helium escape valve. Will you actually use it? No chance, probably not, but it's still cool to know that it would work if you did. And for the final watch here, I want to look at the Zelos Swordfish. Zelos is a brand that has long been known for just delivering just kind of head scratching value for money in a way. That's really the only way I could describe this brand, because sometimes you're just looking at it and you're like, how can they afford to do this? Because it's just really a great watch for the money. These are watches that really follow that same form. 42mm case, 48mm lug to lug, 200 meters of water resistance. Lume is some of the best that I've come across in the entire industry, whether we're talking luxury products, Seiko, Citizen, you name it. Zelos has some phenomenal lume across all of their watches, and also on the inside getting a reliable Seiko movement to go along with it. One of the big success stories for me in the past 10 years in micro brands and small upstarts has to be Zelos. If you're looking at what they've done as a small Singapore-based brand and just expanding out to be like this really collectively loved micro. I think they've done an amazing job in doing this. So now we're gonna move on to the second category. This is the dive style category, or maybe dive capable is another way to say it. So not ISO compliant dive watches, but definitely worthy of the job. First, kicking us off is the Casio Duro. This is a loved watch. It's actually a watch that can be found well under $100, now spanning a variety of different dial and bezel options. So you can get lost in a lot of these different pieces. I think the standard black dial version can commonly be found for like 40 bucks. It's just a no-brainer type of deal if you want an ultimate beater. I think this really is, outside of a G-Shock, if you're talking about an analog display, might be the ultimate beater watch. Thickness of 12 millimeters. Yes, it has a 44 millimeter case, but if you've ever worn this watch, you know it wears much smaller with that 48 millimeter lug to lug, 200 meters of water resistance, quartz caliber on the inside, mineral glass, and also recently, just to make a point of this, there is now a 38 millimeter option of the Duro, but before you start going and clicking and buying it right now, it does have only 50 meters of water resistance. So I don't know, kind of a weird water resistance rating for a dive watch. So I don't know. Now next up, we have two different Seiko products. I'm gonna start with the full size here first with the Seiko 5 Sports. This is known as the 5KX by some, this SRPD collection. A lot of different ones to get lost in, different styles. I think this was released with over 20 different options when they were initially unveiled a few years back. 42.5 millimeter case, so a familiar size for many that are familiar with Seiko. 13.4 millimeters thick, lug to lug of 46 millimeters, so going to wear closer to a 40 millimeter watch on wrist. 100 meters of water resistance, so of that ISO compliant standard, that's all you need for a dive watch. However, it is not a certified dive watch, but it's certainly capable. 4R36 movement on the inside, mineral glass on top, aluminum insert bezel on these watches. They look the part. I love the way that these dials are finished, getting enough aquatic upside with their feasibility in these varieties of environments, but still does have that kind of everyday versatility that I think just looks great. And now getting it in the Seiko 5 lineup can come in a price right around $200. But then the same kind of style, now shifting it down to 38 millimeters. We saw this release earlier this year. This is the SRPK collection of watches. So different dial colors to choose from. You have conventional black, you have the silver tone dial, you have an orange dial, you also have this teal blue dial to go along with it. 38 millimeter case size, but I would say these wear to that size, if not slightly smaller. The lug to lug on this in ratio of the dial size, or the case size, pardon me, is going to be a little bit longer in comparison to the other versions of the 5KX. Thickness is 12.1 millimeters, 100 meters of water resistance, and 4R36 movement on the inside. These have somewhat quietly slipped through the cracks this year, and I do think they're probably some of the best releases from Seiko this year for those that have been long just asking for a smaller case size in that 5KX format. So next up, we have a dive watch that I would say is pretty underrated, not talked about as much as maybe it should be. There's probably a variety of reasons for this, which we can talk about, but this is the Glycine Combat Sub. So this is a watch Swiss made that is available in both a quartz option, you also have a mechanical option, and some of those quartz options can be found for like right around $200, $300, which tremendous value. Even the mechanical options typically find some pretty good deals out there. Their distribution's kind of a mess. 42 millimeters for the diameter, thickness of 11 millimeters, pretty thin for a dive watch in this segment with 200 meters to go along with it. Longer on that lug to lug end, 49.5 millimeters, and a option of the quartz ronda movement or a ETA or Sellita powered version on the inside. Glycine is a bit all over the place with their distribution. Now I believe they are owned by Invicta since like around 2016. So it's a little harder to identify where you can buy them. A lot of markdown, weird tactics for their pricing, and it's just kind of all over the place, but that ends up being a place where you can typically sometimes find a decent deal for these, especially compared to pretty much any other brand in the industry. They're kind of an anomaly here. And then this brand, I mean, you have to say, pretty legitimate history when it comes to some of their military-oriented watches during the 20th century. So major kudos to this brand, and probably more overlooked than they should be. Another brand that's not talked about a lot, but a brand that probably should be mentioned here under $500 is Luminox. So Luminox, with their original Navy SEAL, is a watch that appeals to a variety of different people for a few different reasons. I think one, they're one of the rare instances of utilizing tritium as a illuminating material in watches. So one of the select few. You have Ball, you have Marathon, and really Luminox. Those are kind of the ones that are consistent with this glass tube tritium approach. You also have the Navy SEALs affiliation. Now, these are not watches that are worn by Navy SEALs, but apparently they were designed with Navy SEALs when this watch was produced. And they're rather robust. They have like this combination, given their case material, that kind of gives you this very lightweight G-Shock type of feel with an analog approach. 43 millimeter case in this instance, 12 millimeters in thickness, 46 millimeter lug to lug, so pretty wearable for its case size, and a water resistance rating of 200 meters. Ronda Swiss quartz movement on the inside, tritium lume. Pretty cool watches for those that are maybe more outdoorsy, want something more, I hate to say this term, but tactical looking. So this is really the approach that you could go for here that's maybe not thought about as much as some of the others on this list. Now let's look at some Orients. I'm going to mention 3 different Orients in sequence. First, you have the Orient Kano. So this is the larger case size of the 3 here, with a 44 millimeter case, 50.5 millimeter lug to lug. Different handset and styling compared to the other watches that we're going to be mentioning here. And that's really the differentiating factor mostly for these watches, but the Kano is going to be the largest. Standard, solid water resistance, 200 meters, solid lume to go along with it, nice movements on the inside that are pretty reliable and run pretty accurately compared to the competition. This one has the F6922, different dial colors and bezel options to choose from. And the other 2 watches I want to mention from Orient here are the Komatsu and then the Mako 3. The Mako 3 is a new addition for Orient, but it actually utilizes the similar case structure of the Komatsu, which I find to be very wearable for those that want a smaller case option in a diving format. This is a 41.8 millimeter case, but wears much smaller than that thanks to the 46.3 millimeter lug to lug. Thin bezel on this, 200 meters of water resistance on both of these, and the other upside of both of them is going to be a sapphire crystal. And then next up, we have the Bulova Devil Diver, the Oceanographer as it's also known. This is a watch that I really do enjoy. I mean, it's kind of just weird in a lot of ways. Like those indices are different, shorter hands, the track and where it sits on the dial itself. You have like the Cyclops indication. It's not the most run-of-the-mill looking dive watch. And to go along with it, then you have this cushion, very large, rounded case structure to top it all off. Different case options to choose from. Both of them are going to wear smaller than what the case size is going to indicate with that lug to lug dimension, but do have this kind of strange, more rounded effect with how like the side of the case and the lugs are going to be oriented and shaped. 200 meters of water resistance. These have 8 series calibers on the inside, so going to be operating at 3 hertz. This looks back to the mid 20th century, 60s and 70s for its styling. It absolutely feels like it's just been pulled out of a time capsule from that period. And then for our final watch in this category, we have the Tissot C-Star 1000 40 millimeters. Now, some of you might be asking, there's a C-Star at 40 millimeters in case size? Yes, there is. This was one of those watches that just kind of slipped through the cracks this year. It does come with a quartz movement on the inside, but from a wearability standpoint and how this watch might be appealing for an entry-level Swiss watch under $500 retail, a pretty compelling package there. C-Star collection comes with a sapphire crystal, 300 meters of water resistance, so getting a nice step up compared to some of the competition. ETA caliber on the inside, different dial colors to choose from, and then a wearable case at 40 millimeters. Now we shift into the professional diving category, and the first watch here is going to be a G-Shock. And some of you might be saying, G-Shock dive watch, is that really it? Is that really something we want to start off with? The Casio G-Shock, one thing that people maybe don't realize is how this has actually been an issued watch for a lot of military organizations, especially in the diving field. US Navy SEALs have been using G-Shocks for many decades. And this watch we have here is a pretty unique one. This is going to take that 5600 case, but get you some added upside. This is the GWM 5610. 43.2 millimeter case, 46.7 millimeter lug to lug, 200 meters of water resistance, reliable Casio module on the inside, mineral glass, very wearable on the wrist, traditional format in many ways with its size, but then also coming with atomic timekeeping and tough solar charging to go along with everything else. So next up here, we have a watch that some will argue maybe doesn't deserve to be in this little segment, but I'm gonna make the argument that it should. This is the Vostok Amphibia. This is a watch with a lot of military use in the past, but also it's a watch that is so simple, almost to a point where it becomes funny because you see how it works and you're like, yeah, I mean, that's down and dirty, but it does do the job. And that's really what I think a dive watch should be. Now, the Vostok Amphibia has a unique crown system. Its case back sealing system basically acts as with pressure on the dial and as pressure underwater is pressing on the case, it makes the seal tighter. It's almost creating this suction-like environment where it compresses on itself. And it's such a simple level of engineering, but it works, and it allows these watches to be available under $100, manufacturer calibers on the inside, mechanical manufacturer calibers on the inside. Last time I mentioned this, someone made a funny comment about like the customer service department when one of these broke for me. They basically just said, yeah, shake it really hard. And the funny thing is, as silly as that might seem as a concept, the guy said it ended up working, and they're like, hey, well, I can't get mad at him, and I never had any problems after that. So just warning you, this is what you're getting into, but if you're talking about affordable dive watches, these watches absolutely are like just like cult legends that many people love. So next up, we have a couple of watches here that I don't even know many people know exist, and are ones from Seiko that kind of get lost in the mix of their many options. But they do have a distinct lane that they can kind of call their own. This is the SNE 583 and the 585. Couple things I'll call out on these watches. Yes, they are going to be solar powered, which does give you that on-the-go type of set it and forget it lifestyle. If you just want to set this watch once and just be pretty dead on accurate, this is what you're going to be able to do. But also here, sapphire crystal, and then in addition are getting a 38.5mm case with a longer lug to lug. The lug to lug on these watches is around the same as some Seiko turtle cases, which is pretty crazy. Or say like a 42.5mm case from some like the SKX. It's like really that length. So they wear, unlike pretty much anything else, but they do wear pretty reasonable. I'd say this wears like a 38.5, 39mm on wrist, kind of that mid-sized dive watch format. They're also thinner at 10.6mm thanks to the quartz movement on the inside. ISO compliant dive watches, 10-month battery life when it is on that full solar charge, and it's very quick to charge these babies up. And the lume on them is very good and as normal, class leading from Seiko. Similar fashion, but a watch that has typically been one of the first to be mentioned when talking about professional dive watches. This is the Citizen ProMaster Eco Drive dive watches. So these are watches that long were just established as some of the best, just do-it-all type of dive watches in their segment. Very aggressive with the markers on the dial, the bezel, and some of the approaches that just come off as less mass appealing than what maybe some will like from a dive watch. But no question, when you're talking about really setting that standard for this entry-level tier for a dive watch and being a watch that a real diver would choose, these are quick to come to mind. 44mm case size, 48.2mm for the lug to lug. I'd say these wear like a 41.5 to 42mm on wrist, 11.6mm in thickness, 200 meters of water resistance. Right there, along with Seiko, is some of the best lume in the business, and the Eco Drive caliber on the inside, giving that quartz oscillation with solar power. Further, we have another ProMaster model with the Fugu. So this is an extension off of that original 1989 reference known as the Fugu. And these were recently just updated, unveiled to the broader market at large in the last 12 or so months. 44mm case size, very similar wearability to the previous ProMaster, a little bit longer on the lug-to-lug end, and obviously going to be thicker with the inclusion of a Miyota caliber on the inside, as these are mechanical. Also comes with a sapphire crystal, which is a nice way to separate themselves from some of the other divers that are going to be using mineral glass in this segment. But no question, a go-to for those that have a longing for going for legitimate dive watches. And then to round us out here, I want to mention like 3 different categories of watches. I'm going to mention the Seiko Samurai, the Seiko Turtle, and then the Seiko King Turtle. Couple ways I will differentiate all of them. The Samurai has more of this broader sword style handset, angular case shape. The Turtle looks back to the 6309 from the 1970s with its more rounded case structure, and the King Turtle builds off of the Turtle design and will allow you to get into this waffle style texture dial. Then you're also getting the Cyclops at that 3 o'clock position, a ceramic insert, very similar wearability with the case, with all of them coming with phenomenal lume. And if I was gonna say, all right, just pick one dive watch that's like a no-brainer, balances the enthusiast intrigue, the history, the value for money, I think Seiko is such a safe place to go for this price segment. And also what I like about them is, yes, they have this professional spec with all of these watches, but there's so many different versions to get lost in, and many of them have this great everyday wearing functionality to them. I think some dive watches tend to think that they are a dive watch, so they should only appeal to divers, when the reality, most people that own dive watches won't go any deeper than 3 feet in the kiddie pool. So if that's you and you want a balance between a watch that is going to look the part, be good value for money, and still have that robustness if you ever did want to push it to its limits, this is where I think Seiko truly excels in delivering on a lot of this other elements that I was mentioning. But all right guys, that's my video here today looking at some of the best dive watches under $500. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon. We're closing in on 1 million subscribers, which is absolutely nuts. So if you can help me get there, I'd really appreciate it. I never thought I would get close to this, but it's looking like it actually might happen, which is pretty crazy. And just talking about it is nuts. I mean, I started this with no intention, and to be at this point is crazy. So thank you guys all for watching. If you did enjoy the video, I really do appreciate it with just any of those likes, comments, and getting the conversation going. If you're gonna leave a comment, maybe make a suggestion. What's another dive watch in this sub $500 tier that you would recommend for people? Also, definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. Also, how we're able to fund all of the productions here is through selling watches on our site. So if you're in the market for a watch, love to have your business. I know you can buy a watch pretty much anywhere nowadays, but it allows us to keep doing what we're doing, and we love what we do here. Guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.